You think being understanding makes you noble. You think being calm when you're disrespected makes you strong. But what if I told you it's just fear pretending to be kindness? Being too nice isn't a virtue. It's a silent agreement to be used. Stoicism doesn't teach you to be soft. It teaches you to be strong, in silence, in restraint, in dignity. But too many confuse silence with weakness, and understanding with permission. And that's where life begins to erode you from the inside out. So today, let's unlearn the disease of over-accommodating others. Let's dive into the dark side of kindness and rebuild a mindset rooted in strength, not in self-erasure. This isn't about being rude, this is about being real, because if you don't draw your line, someone else will draw it for you. If I may ask you a question, how many times have you forgiven someone who never changed? Not because they deserved it, but because you were afraid of losing them. You've probably heard it, just be patient with them, they're going through a lot. So you stay quiet, you hold back. You keep giving chances, hoping they'll change, or at least notice your patience. But they don't, they take more, and you shrink more. Why? Because being too understanding often hides a deeper problem, the fear of confrontation, the fear of being alone, the fear of not being seen as the good one. Epictetus once said, "If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation." But Stoicism was never about becoming a doormat. It was about becoming unshakable, not invisible. When you tolerate toxic behavior under the name of peace, that's not peace, that's quiet self-destruction. You bend over backwards for people who wouldn't move an inch for you. You explain yourself to those who have no interest in understanding you. You apologize just to keep others comfortable. But what about you? What about your discomfort? What about your boundaries? What about your worth? Being kind does not mean tolerating what breaks you. That is not Stoicism. That is surrender. You see, when Marcus Aurelius said, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury," he didn't mean to suffer silently in toxic cycles. He meant, don't become cruel like them, but don't let them keep pulling you into the fire either. Walk away, not with rage, with clarity. When was the last time you said yes out of guilt? When everything in your soul screamed no? People often mistake Stoic strength for stillness, for silence, for surrender. But real Stoicism, it's not about doing nothing. It's about knowing exactly when to act, and exactly when not to. And that requires power most people don't have. Power over your impulses, power over your reactions, power over your need to be understood. Most people react. They explode, withdraw, over-explain, or try to fix everyone around them. But the Stoic doesn't chase validation. He doesn't yell to be heard. He listens. He doesn't fight every battle. He chooses the right one. Restraint isn't weakness. It's training. Just like an archer doesn't release the arrow the second he draws it. The Stoic doesn't fire off emotions at every provocation, because he knows what's done in emotion is usually undone in regret. Stoic wisdom, Seneca's warning. Seneca said, "He who is brave is free," but bravery doesn't always look like raising your voice. Sometimes it's quietly walking away from a situation you could destroy, but choose not to. Sometimes it's not responding to a disrespectful message, not because you're scared, but because you've outgrown the need to prove anything, and that is strength. The modern world rewards noise, but Stoicism rewards stillness with substance. When you move with discipline instead of drama, you create space between the trigger and the response. And in that space, you become powerful, not because you force control, but because you no longer need it. Reflective prompt. Think back to the last time someone hurt you. Did you respond from your values or your wound? You see, the danger of being too understanding is that you begin to tolerate pain disguised as peace. You begin to think, if I just stay calm enough, they'll change. If I forgive them again, they'll see my heart. But no, they don't change. And now you're the one suffering in silence. So here's the truth. You can be kind without being naive. You can be understanding without being used. You can be forgiving without allowing repeat offense. That's the Stoic balance. discipline plus dignity, boundaries plus grace, stillness plus strength. Stoic living doesn't mean putting others first at all costs. It means putting your character first, always. Part 3. Stoic strength isn't passive, it's power in restraint. Let me ask you something. How many times have you walked away from a conversation, a relationship, or a situation feeling empty? Not because you were weak, but because you held everything in? You didn't speak up, you didn't express the hurt, you didn't correct the disrespect, because you didn't want to create tension, so you swallowed it again and again and again. But here's the truth. What you don't express doesn't disappear. It builds, and eventually it turns into resentment. Resentment is the silent poison of the two understanding. You don't scream, you don't shout, you just smile. But deep inside you're exhausted. You think Stoicism is staying calm no matter what. But true Stoicism means knowing when to walk away before your peace becomes performative. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. What happens when your thoughts are bitter, but your words are sweet? What happens when you're constantly suppressing your truth to maintain appearances? Your soul gets dyed in quiet misery. That's not Stoicism, that's self-abandonment. Let me make this clear, self-sacrifice is noble, but self-erasure is not. You were not born to be the emotional shock absorber for other people's chaos. You were not meant to water yourself down so others can shine. And you are not required to keep saying yes just to be liked by people who never cared for your no. There's nothing wrong with being kind. But when your kindness begins to cost you your peace, it's no longer kindness, it's self-harm dressed as virtue. Reflective on this, who in your life have you been over-accommodating, not out of love, but out of fear? Here's something simple yet powerful. Every time you say yes to something that doesn't serve your peace, ask yourself, am I doing this from love or from fear? Because Stoic strength is not about pleasing others, it's about honoring yourself, quietly, firmly, consistently. Let's remember Epictetus' timeless truth. Freedom is the only worthy goal in life, and sometimes the only way to be free is to stop explaining yourself to people who never cared to understand you. Part 4. The cost of self-abandonment in the name of peace. Let's talk about something nobody really warns you about. You can lose yourself without even realizing it, not through trauma, not through failure, but through the tiny daily decisions to stay quiet when something bothered you, to go along with things you didn't believe in, to keep saying it's okay when deep down it wasn't. And it always starts the same way. It's not worth the argument. Maybe I'm just being too sensitive. I don't want to make a big deal out of it. So you stay silent, you endure, you adapt, and before you know it, you're no longer living your life, you're performing in someone else's version of peace. Seneca once wrote, "He who does not prevent a wrong when he can is as guilty as he who commits it." But how many wrongs have you allowed just to avoid discomfort? How many times have you watched someone cross your boundaries and told yourself, it's not that deep, just to avoid conflict? It is that deep. Because every time you silence your truth for the sake of harmony, you teach yourself that your voice doesn't matter. Let me ask you this honestly. When did you become so afraid of upsetting others that you stopped protecting yourself? They say peace is priceless, but not when it comes at the cost of self-respect. Not when you're constantly picking up emotional debts in relationships where you're the only one giving. Not when you're always the one compromising, forgiving, bending, and they never notice because they've gotten used to you being the one who never breaks. That's not love. That's not maturity, and that's definitely not Stoicism, because Stoicism is not about self-erasure, it's about self-command. It's the practice of knowing where you end and where the world begins, and protecting that line with quiet strength. Stoics weren't martyrs, they were warriors of the soul, and you too must learn to draw the line where your peace is no longer protected, even if it means losing people, even if it means walking alone, even if it means becoming the bad guy in someone else's story. Because here's the truth, they may call you cold, they may call you distant, but what they're really saying is, you're not letting me use you anymore. Let's be brutally honest. You can't keep calling it love when it's costing you your self-worth. You can't keep calling it patience when what you really feel is resentment, and you can't keep calling it stoicism when you're just afraid of conflict, because stoicism never asked you to accept everything. It asks you to accept what is beyond your control, not what you have the power to walk away from. And there's a big difference. If a snake keeps biting you and you keep saying, when you're careful not to offend, careful not to speak up, careful not to take up space, that kind of life becomes a slow death, not of the body, but of the self. Every time you abandon yourself to protect someone else's comfort, you send a silent message to your inner world. You don't matter. Keep quiet. Shrink. Be small. Eventually, you forget how to speak up at all. You don't just lose your boundaries, you lose your identity. And the tragedy, you did it all in the name of love, in the name of kindness, in the name of stoic calm, but it wasn't stoicism. It was fear, dressed as virtue. Take a reflective pause. Take a moment. Ask yourself, what parts of you have you abandoned just to be accepted? Whose approval are you still chasing by staying silent? And is the peace you're protecting even real? Part 5. You're not cold. You've just stopped explaining yourself. They say you've changed. You don't respond as quickly anymore. You don't explain every move. You don't bend to guilt. You don't absorb everyone's energy. And suddenly, you're the villain, not because you hurt anyone, but because you stopped being available for what was hurting you. They call you cold. They call you distant. They say you're not like you used to be. But maybe that's the point. What they see as coldness is actually emotional clarity. You've just stopped dancing for approval. You've stopped explaining yourself to people who were never listening in the first place. You've stopped trying to be the understanding one at the cost of your own peace. And that shift, that's what makes them uncomfortable, because they benefited from your confusion, from your softness, from your endless explanations. It's about becoming unshakable. And to become unshakable, you must first become unavailable for the things that break your peace. Reflect on this. Who's been labeling your growth as selfish, simply because you're not as easy to manipulate anymore? Here's something people rarely talk about. You don't become distant because you're heartless. You become distant because you've learned the cost of being too close to the wrong people. Because your peace feels like punishment to those who are used to your chaos. But here's what Stoicism teaches. You don't owe anyone access to parts of you they only want to exploit. So no, you're not cold, you're clear, you're grounded, you're done performing. You've chosen stillness over struggle, discernment over drama, and peace over popularity. They may not like it, but that's none of your concern, because Stoicism isn't about making people comfortable. Now you speak less, you say no without guilt, you leave when things feel off, and that to them looks like arrogance. But to the Stoic, that's freedom. Epictetus said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." And that's exactly what you've started doing. You no longer argue about your worth, you live it. You no longer beg for respect, you command it silently. People who don't respect your boundaries will always resent your growth. You've felt the drain of constant explaining. You've felt the ache of giving your energy to people who used it against you. You've watched people twist your kindness into weakness, and now you're choosing different, not because you're bitter, but because you're finally awake. You no longer beg to be understood, because the people who matter will listen without needing a presentation. They won't need paragraphs for what could be respected with a sentence. This shift, this calm silence, is the result of thousands of internal battles you fought in rooms no one ever saw. And now that you've stopped over-explaining your value, people feel like they're losing access to you. That's because they are. Marcus Aurelius said, "The tranquility that comes when you stop caring what they say or think or do, only what you do. You don't chase clarity from those who thrive in confusion. You don't chase closure from those who benefit from your chaos. You've learned to offer it to yourself, not out of pride but out of preservation." You see, the world is loud, but Stoics, they are powerful in silence, not because they don't feel, but because they choose not to be ruled by what they feel. Now you don't answer every message, you don't show up to every fight, you don't explain every no, and some people will never understand that, but your peace was never meant for them to understand. It was meant for you to protect, because the Stoic knows you can't explain your way into being valued. You live, you act, you embody, and you let those actions do the talking. So no, you're not cold, you've just remembered who you are, and that's not someone who trades their silence for acceptance, not anymore. Final reflection for part 5. Ask yourself this: am I protecting my peace or just playing small to stay liked? Part 6. Being Stoic doesn't mean being alone, it means choosing the right people. There's a myth people believe about Stoicism, that it makes you cold, emotionless, isolated, but true Stoicism, it's not about cutting everyone off, it's about choosing who gets to stay. You've been told that to be strong, you must walk alone, but even Marcus Aurelius had trusted generals, Seneca had Lucilius, Epictetus had his students. Even the most disciplined minds understood this. You can be self-reliant and still deeply connected. The key isn't to avoid people, it's to avoid the wrong people. Discernment over isolation. Stoicism doesn't tell you to live on a mountain in silence. It teaches you to live among people without losing yourself. That means recognizing who drains you, who grows you, who respects your peace, and who only visits when they need to break it. Seneca once wrote, "Associate with people who are likely to improve you. Welcome those whom you are capable of improving." You're not supposed to carry everyone. You're not supposed to keep proving your worth to people who don't even value their own. Think about your current circle. Is it built on depth or distraction? Do your conversations nourish your mind or numb your spirit? Because the truth is, you become what you're surrounded by, and if the people around you are loud, impulsive, and emotionally erratic, soon you will be too. The Stoic doesn't run from others. You're not supposed to carry everyone. You're not supposed to keep proving your worth to people who don't even value their own. Think about your current circle. Is it built on depth or distraction? Do your conversations nourish your mind or numb your spirit? Because the truth is, you become what you're surrounded by, and if the people around you are loud, impulsive, and emotionally erratic, soon you will be too. The Stoic doesn't run from others. He just becomes extremely intentional about who gets his energy. Friendships built on gossip will crumble under truth. Connections built on convenience will vanish under struggle, but bonds built on values, they withstand storms. You don't need 100 people to clap for you. You need 2 who will tell you when your thinking is clouded. You need 1 who reminds you of your philosophy when your emotions are loud. One good relationship rooted in virtue is worth more than... He just becomes extremely intentional about who gets his energy. Friendships built on gossip will crumble under truth. Connections built on convenience will vanish under struggle, but bonds built on values, they withstand storms. You don't need 100 people to clap for you. You need 2 who will tell you when your thinking is clouded. You need 1 who reminds you of your philosophy when your emotions are loud. One good relationship rooted in virtue is worth more than 100 based in comfort. Being Stoic doesn't mean being alone. It means not being afraid to be alone if that's what it takes to protect your inner clarity. Reflective Piompt, who around you pushes you closer to your best self and who pulls you away from it. Let's get honest for a moment. How many times have you kept someone in your life not because they made you better, but because they were familiar? They knew your history, but they didn't respect your growth. They liked the old version of you, the one that didn't have boundaries. The one that kept over-giving, over-explaining, over-fixing, and now that you've changed, they act like you're the problem. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Not everyone is meant to go where you're going. That doesn't make them bad. That just makes them misaligned. The Stoic doesn't cling to relationships out of nostalgia. He honors connection, but doesn't fear detachment. Epictetus said, "The key is to keep company only with people who uplift you, whose presence calls forth your best." If someone's presence triggers anxiety, guilt, or self-doubt, that's not Stoicism to endure. That's a sign to create space. We've been conditioned to think loyalty means lifelong access, but loyalty to others should never come before loyalty to your own peace. It's okay to outgrow people. It's okay to evolve past a certain dynamic. It's okay to walk away without guilt when staying means shrinking. And sometimes the Stoic choice is the hardest one. letting go of a bond once prayed for because you finally see it was built on your silence, not your strength. This doesn't mean you stop loving them, it just means you start loving yourself too. You begin honoring the version of you that's growing, not the one that kept everyone comfortable. Relationships in Stoicism aren't about how long you've known someone. They're about whether that person helps you remember your values. Do they calm your inner storm or add to it? Do they encourage reflection or distract you from it? Do they respect your stillness or interrupt it? Reflective fact. Who are you afraid to outgrow because you don't want to face the silence that comes after? You owe it to yourself to build a life that feels light, and sometimes that means letting go of heavy people. Part 7. The final Stoic truth. You owe yourself peace. You've been through storms, you've bent under pressure, you've sacrificed, tolerated, endured. But here's something you might have forgotten along the way. You owe yourself peace. Not just moments of it, a life built around it, and that kind of life, it doesn't happen by accident. It's built, choice by choice, moment by moment, and that's the heart of Stoicism. It's not about becoming numb, it's about becoming free internally, regardless of chaos around you. You've spent years giving others the benefit of the doubt. Now give yourself the same. You've extended compassion outward, now aim it inward. You've forgiven others for hurting you, now forgive yourself for staying too long. Peace isn't found in other people's approval, it's found in the quiet knowing that you no longer owe anyone a version of yourself you've outgrown. You no longer need to defend your boundaries. You no longer need to be everything to everyone. You just need to be true to yourself. And that requires daily discipline, to walk away when peace is threatened, to speak less when ego wants to speak more, to rest when the world glorifies burnout, to reflect instead of react. That's what makes Stoicism powerful, not because it protects your image, but because it protects your essence. Most people look outside to fix the noise, but the Stoic goes inward, and there he finds something rare, a center that doesn't shake, a strength that doesn't shout, a freedom that isn't loud but unmovable. You don't need to control the world, you need to control what you give your energy to, because the truth is, what you allow is what will continue, and what you continue is what becomes your life. Reflect on this fact. If you truly believed your peace was sacred, what would you stop tolerating today? Let this be the moment you return home to yourself, not to the version of you that was overly accommodating, not to the one that stayed quiet just to keep people around, not to the one that confused tolerance with strength, but the real you, the one who understands now more than ever that peace is a choice and a boundary. You owe yourself morning stillness before the world demands your energy. Friendships rooted in truth, not convenience. Environments that don't punish your growth. Conversations that don't drain your spirit. Silence when noise becomes manipulation, because no one's going to hand you peace. It's something you must claim, even if that means walking alone, even if it means letting go of the image others had of you, even if it means becoming the version of you they no longer recognize. The Stoic path isn't loud, it's not dramatic, it's not about winning arguments or looking perfect, it's about becoming internally solid, so that even when everything around you shifts, you remain clear, grounded, and aligned. And here's the final truth. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to heal. You are allowed to evolve. You are allowed to stop explaining. You are allowed to protect your peace like your life depends on it, because it does. So the next time someone says you've become cold, smile. Not with arrogance, but with clarity. Because cold people punish the world for their pain, but Stoics, they rise quietly, they walk forward with intention, they forgive without forgetting, and they never apologize for guarding their peace. Final Stoic reminder from Marcus Aurelius: the happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts, and now you know, you control that quality, you decide what enters and what gets to stay. This is your peace. Don't wait for permission to protect it. Thank you for walking this journey. If this video resonated with you, like, share, and leave a comment below. I owe myself peace. Subscribe for more Stoic wisdom every week. Your peace starts here.